My name is Evelyn Harper, and 3 nights ago I thought I was going to Hawaii with my family. I'd been folding beach towels at the kitchen table, sliding little seashell keychains into bags labeled with my grandchildren's names when my phone buzzed. "Mom, you won't be coming. Claire wants this to be just her family. You've already done your part by paying." The words lit up my screen like they were on fire. For a moment I thought it was some twisted joke. My hands smelled faintly of sunscreen, the lavender candle for our beach dinner still on the counter. Outside, the wind rattled the old chimes my husband hung years ago. Inside, my son's message told me I didn't belong. I didn't answer right away. The message sat there bright and blunt while the kettle clicked off and the kitchen fell strangely still. I turned the phone face down like it might bite and pressed my palms to the cool wood of the table. The seashell keychains looked ridiculous now, lined up like soldiers waiting on orders that would never come. I could smell the faint citrus of the cleaner I'd used an hour earlier, the kind my husband used to tease me about Evelyn. "You're trying to polish the grain right off the oak." The wind nudged the back door, and the chimes clinked once as if trying to be gentle. I walked to the sink and ran water over my wrists, the way nurses used to tell me to do when I got too anxious. The lavender candle stood unlit beside the matches. I had planned to bring it to the beach our first night to light it and tell my grandchildren about the man who wore a bedsheet like a cape after a bad sunburn and still laughed until he cried. I had pictured Michael smiling embarrassed by his own tenderness and Claire letting her shoulders drop for once. It was a small dream, but it was mine. My phone buzzed again on the table, not a call, just the soft thud of another thoughtless hour passing. I dried my hands and went to the den. The old laptop wheezed awake. The folder labeled Travel Fund blinked at me like a dare. I laid my finger on the trackpad and hovered over it, then stopped. Not yet. Not with my heart banging like a screen door in a storm. Back in the kitchen, I unscrewed the candle lid and breathed it in. If a person can be erased with a sentence, I told myself a person can be restored with a breath. I set the candle down and finally picked up the phone. I wouldn't plead. I wouldn't fight. I would wait just long enough to understand exactly what I was up against. The next morning, the rain had moved in steady and gray beating against the windows, like the house was holding its breath. I made coffee. I barely tasted, staring at the calendar where I'd circled the departure date in red. 2 days. Just 2 days until the trip I'd built like a cathedral, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. I opened my email more out of habit than curiosity, and there it was. Subject line, Final Itinerary. The travel agency's logo sat neat in the corner, and below it the names of every traveler. I scrolled once slowly, my pulse loud in my ears. 8 names. Michael, Claire, their kids, Claire's parents, her sister, and her sister's boyfriend. Not me, not even a placeholder. I zoomed in, searching for some mistake, some attachment I'd missed. Nothing. I leaned back in my chair. My travel fund had paid for it all, the villa. The flights, the rental cars, the luau tickets, even the early check-in fees, because Claire didn't like to wait around. And here I was, discovering my absence, like a stranger reading a guest list. The scent of coffee turned bitter. I thought of the nights I'd sat at this same table grading online piano lessons until my eyes blurred the afternoon spent sewing throw pillows I'd later sell for $20 apiece. Every bit of it funneled into that account. Every bit of it for a moment that would now happen without me. From the living room, the clock chimed the half hour. My phone lit up with a new text, this one from Claire herself. "We've got everything handled, Evelyn. You should take this time to rest. Focus on yourself. Focus on myself." The words had the hollow sweetness of something store-bought polite enough to pass but tasteless when you bit down. I closed the email, then opened the banking app. My name sat at the top, account owner Evelyn Harper. Underneath, the balance stared back whole and untouched for now. I tapped the settings tab and found the freeze option. One click and I could make every one of those reservations vanish into smoke. But I didn't click. Not yet. Not until I was sure they meant every word they'd sent me. That evening I tried to read, but the sentences swam on the page. The rain had stopped leaving the air damp and cold. I wandered into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, though what I really wanted was something stronger. The refrigerator hummed the only sound in the house. I picked up my phone and typed a short message to Michael. "Let me know if you'd like any help with the kids' bags or snacks before the trip. I can bring extra motion sickness bands for Olivia." I kept it light, almost casual, like I wasn't still bleeding from the inside. I hit send and waited. The little read indicator popped up within minutes, and then nothing. Not a word back, not even the politeness of "thanks, Mom." I set the phone down and stared at it for a long time, as if I could force it to buzz with an apology. It stayed silent. I walked to my desk in the den and opened the old ledger where I kept handwritten notes about the travel fund, every deposit, every withdrawal. The pages told a story I knew by heart: tutoring hours logged after midnight, the sale of my mother's antique china, the year I skipped buying a winter coat to put another $200 into the account. I had never been careless with money. I had never been careless with them. By the time the streetlights flickered on outside, my decision had begun to take shape. If they could erase me from the trip so cleanly, maybe I could erase my funding just as easily. I wasn't thinking about revenge, at least not yet. I was thinking about fairness, about the way you teach people how to treat you. I closed the ledger and ran my fingers over its worn cover. If I acted, there would be no going back to the quiet, compliant version of myself they'd come to expect. The thought was frightening and thrilling in the same breath. The day before their flight, the house felt like it was holding its own kind of storm. I woke early, though I hadn't slept much. The clock read 5:17 a.m., the sky still ink dark. I made tea instead of coffee, letting the steam rise into my face. It smelled faintly of peppermint, the kind I saved for long, cold evenings. By mid-morning, I'd made up my mind to give them one last chance. Not a plea, just a small final test. I sent another text to Michael heading into town later. "Do you need me to pick up anything for the kids' snacks for the flight?" The message showed delivered, then read. No reply. The screen stayed blank, like a door quietly closed in my face. Around noon, I pulled the fireproof lockbox from the top shelf of the closet. Inside were all the documents tied to the travel fund. Every form, every receipt, every confirmation email printed and stapled neatly. My name was on every page, no co-owners, no alternate signers. It was my account, my money, my trip. I sat at the desk, opening my laptop. The banking app came up with a soft chime. I navigated to the travel fund account. Balance $21,942.15. Linked cards 7. I imagined them at the airport moving through security with the easy confidence of people who think every detail has been handled for them. I imagined the exact moment the first card was declined. Confusion first, then irritation, then panic. My finger hovered over the freeze account button. It would take less than 2 seconds. A small box would pop up asking for confirmation. Once I clicked, yes, every reservation would unravel. But I didn't do it. Not yet. I wanted the timing to be perfect. I wanted the silence to be as sharp as the one they'd given me. I closed the laptop and slid the lockbox back into place. For the rest of the afternoon, I kept my hands busy polishing the silverware, watering the plants, folding laundry. But every now and then I'd glance at the clock and think about the gate number printed on their boarding passes, and about what would happen when the system told them payment denied. Morning broke with a thin gold light spilling across the kitchen floor. I was already dressed, the Travel Fund app open on my laptop, waiting for the moment I'd decided on. Their flight out of Portland was scheduled for 10:35 a.m., which meant they'd be checking in around 8:15. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, steadying my hands on the mug. The house was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked once and then fell silent as if the whole street was holding its breath with me. At exactly 8:18, my phone lit up with a photo from Claire on social media, matching straw hats, the kids grinning in the back seat of what looked like an airport shuttle. Her caption read, "Off to paradise. Family only." The last 2 words landed like a slap. I took a slow sip, set the cup down, and clicked the freeze account button. The confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to suspend all linked transactions? Yes, another prompt. Linked cards will be disabled immediately. Yes, the icon turned blue. Status frozen. I leaned back in my chair and waited. 10 minutes later, Michael called. I let it ring. A text followed. Hey, we're getting some weird error at check-in. Can you check the account? I set the phone down without answering. More calls came closer together now. Claire's number flashed on the screen, then Michael's again. Voicemails piled up polite at first, then tight with urgency. Mom, the car rental says the card's declined. Can you fix it? Evelyn, please call me back. We can't board without paying the baggage fees. I stood at the kitchen window watching a pair of sparrows fuss over the bird bath. Their wings flashed in the sun, oblivious to the chaos 2 states away. My phone kept buzzing, but I didn't move. At 9:02, Michael's voice came low and fast in a voicemail. If this is about that text, can we please talk? Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a scramble to salvage their trip. I closed my laptop, picked up my coffee, and let the silence answer for me. By the time their flight began boarding, I had nearly 30 missed calls. Michael's number, Claire's number, even one from her mother. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I took my mug out to the back porch, letting the crisp spring air clear my head. The maple tree at the edge of my yard was just beginning to show new leaves, pale green and trembling in the breeze. Around 10:20, another text came through. We're boarding now. Please, Mom. We'll talk when we get back. I imagined them hustling down the jet bridge, the kids tugging on their sleeves, trying to understand why everyone looked so tense. They would take off, but there'd be no villa waiting. No car to pick up, no prepaid activities to slide into. Just a string of canceled confirmations and the reality of paying for everything themselves. 2 days later, the refunds started rolling in. First the villa, then the excursions, then the rental car. Each notification pinged softly on my phone like drops of water filling a glass. With every one, the balance in my travel fund rose back to where it had been before I let myself believe I belonged in their plans. That night, I pulled out my worn leather notebook. On the first clean page, I wrote at the top, "The Forgotten Ladies." Under it, I listed names that had been sitting quietly in my heart for years, women from church, from my old neighborhood, from the volunteer group at the library. Women who, like me, had given more than they'd ever received. One by one, I called them. Mary, who hadn't left Oregon in 20 years. Lillian, whose kids only visited on holidays. Rose, who lived alone with her cat, and stacks of mystery novels. Each time I made the same offer, would you like to spend a week in Hawaii with me? Everything's taken care of. The silences on the other end weren't awkward. They were heavy with disbelief. And then came the tears, the laughter, the questions that weren't really questions. Why me? My answer was the same every time, because someone should. The following weeks passed in a blur of arrangements. I booked the same villa I'd once reserved for Michael and Claire, but this time every confirmation email carried my name alone. The travel agent, a warm-voiced woman named Denise, asked if we wanted the same sunset cruise package. I told her yes, but to make sure the table could seat all of us together, no separate sections, no afterthoughts. Mary called one evening just to tell me she'd found her old sun hat in the back of her closet. Lillian emailed me a list of books she planned to read on the plane. Rose shyly asked if we could try snorkeling even though she couldn't swim well. The joy in their voices was something I hadn't heard in my own family for years. When the day came, we met at the airport with rolling suitcases and cautious smiles. Most of them hadn't flown in decades, and we lingered in the terminal just to watch planes lift into the sky. On the flight, Mary leaned over to show me a photo of her late husband, saying he'd always wanted to see the Pacific. Arriving at the villa felt like stepping into a postcard. Palm trees swayed above the curved driveway, and the ocean stretched wide and blue beyond the balcony. Inside, the kitchen counters gleamed, and the dining table, long polished, waiting, took up the center of the main room. I placed a framed photo of my husband in the middle. No one asked me to move it. That first night, we ate grilled fish and mango salad on the patio, the air warm and soft against our skin. Mary kept refilling glasses. Lillian told a story about accidentally wearing mismatched shoes to a wedding, and Rose laughed until she wiped her eyes. As the candles flickered in the breeze, I realized I wasn't thinking about the people who had left me out. I was thinking about the women who were here now, their faces glowing in the lamplight, each of them fully present. The table was full. My heart was too. By the third night, we'd settled into an easy rhythm, late breakfasts on the balcony, afternoons, exploring tide pools, evenings gathered under the string lights that draped across the patio. Every day seemed to loosen something in each of us. Mary stopped checking her watch. Lillian laughed more freely, and Rose began venturing farther into the water with a snorkel mask and the courage of someone realizing it wasn't too late to try. One afternoon after we returned from a short hike to a hidden waterfall, I found a stack of postcards in the villa's desk drawer. An idea took root. That evening, I set the postcards out on the dining table with pens. Write to yourselves, I told them, the way you wish someone had spoken to you 20 years ago. For a while, there was only the sound of pens scratching. Mary wrote slowly, pausing often. Lillian leaned close to the candlelight, her brow furrowed. Rose smiled faintly as she wrote, then flipped her card over to add more. When they finished, we read them aloud. "You matter," Mary's card said. "Rest is not a reward. It's a right," Lillian's read. Rose's simply said, "Don't wait for permission to be happy." We tucked the postcards into envelopes addressed to our own homes where they'd arrive weeks later as quiet reminders. Later, as the ocean murmured beyond the open doors, I lit the lavender candle I'd once intended for another table, another group of people. Its scent drifted through the room, and I thought of my husband. I imagined him sitting among us, nodding with approval at the way the evening unfolded, no sharp words, no one left out. That night, we lingered long after the plates were cleared, talking about the kind of love that doesn't keep score, and the friendships that feel like shelter. I didn't mention Michael or Claire. I didn't need to. The absence of their names was its own peace. Before bed, I blew out the candle and held the warm glass jar in my hands. The wax had melted low, but the light it had given was enough. It would always be enough. 3 days after I returned home, still shaking sand from my suitcase and finding seashells in the pockets of my cardigan, an email from Michael appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, "Just want to clear the air." I clicked it open. "Hi, Mom. We're back now." It was not quite what we imagined. A lot went wrong, and maybe some of that was on us. "Claire says hi. She didn't mean to exclude you like that. She was stressed. You know how she gets. Anyway, maybe we could have handled things better. The kids were confused, and we're trying to protect them from too much drama. That said, we're in a bit of a financial bind after having to rebook a bunch of things on credit. If you're able, could you consider returning the deposit we gave for the trip, or even part of it? We're still family." I read it twice, 3 times. The words blurred at the edges, not because of tears, but because my jaw clenched so tight. Deposit. There had never been a deposit from them. Every cent had come from me. Every reservation, every ticket, every fee mine. And now they wanted me to hand over my money to cover the cost of their choices. I thought about replying, crafting some careful explanation of why the answer was no. But I could already see how it would go. My words twisted my boundaries, painted as bitterness. I closed the email without responding. The silence that followed felt cleaner than any argument I could have made. Outside, the wind chime my husband had hung years ago caught a sudden breeze, sending a clear, bright note through the kitchen. I stood there listening, remembering how he'd once told me, "Sometimes the best thing you can give someone is nothing at all, especially when they've taken too much already." I turned away from the computer, poured myself a glass of iced tea, and carried it to the porch. The afternoon sun slanted low, warm on my face. I didn't think about what Michael might write next. I thought about the women at that long table in Hawaii, their laughter spilling into the night, and I smiled. A week later, I walked along the Oregon coast, the gulls crying overhead and the tide curling in around my ankles. The sand was cool despite the sun, and every step felt like it was carrying me farther from the weight I'd left behind. I thought of that last night in Hawaii. We'd eaten outside the table strewn with candlelight and the scent of grilled pineapple. After dinner, I'd brought out the final lavender candle from my bag. This was meant for my family, I told them, but I think maybe it was always meant for us. No one spoke as I lit it. The flame wavered, then steadied, casting a warm glow over their faces. Mary reached for my hand. "I didn't think I'd feel this again," she whispered. "Peace. Gratitude. Like I matter." Her voice caught, and she squeezed my fingers. I squeezed back. We carried the candle down to the shoreline, the moon spilling silver across the waves. Each woman took a moment to place something in the water, a shell, a ribbon, a name folded into paper. No speeches, no formal goodbyes, just the quiet sound of the ocean taking what we offered. Standing there, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come, or holding out hope for a reunion that would only cost me more of myself. I had given enough to people who thought my love was a resource they could spend without limit. Back on the Oregon shore, the wind shifted, carrying the salt air up toward the bluff. I paused, breathing it in, letting it settle in my chest. I understood now that family isn't always the people who share your blood. It's the ones who share your table, who see you as more than what you can give. The waves slid back, pulling at my feet like they wanted me to follow. I stayed where I was, grounded, steady. Behind me, the wind chime sang a single note from somewhere far away, and I smiled not because I'd won, but because I was finally free. Free and exactly where I belonged.